A big thank you to, in alphabetical order, Councilwoman Shirelle Parker, Councilwoman Jamie Gauthier, and State Representative Joanna McClinton for taking time out of their very busy schedules and joining us for this important conversation today. For those of you joining us for the first time, In the Lab is a discussion series from our If Lab Entrepreneur Incubator. It's an uncoded space for candid discussions around challenges and solutions facing people of color today and how to create our own tables for a more equitable tomorrow. So without further ado, I'll hand this over to Taib, and looking forward to a really robust conversation.
Thank you, Megan. Hi, everybody. I see a lot of friends, colleagues, and just people a part of what I like to call a congregation that supports the work that we do. Um, and I don't want to talk too much today because this is a conversation about Black women in particular. And we have some very powerful women amongst us. But to that point, I wanted to bring up my favorite King on the day of Dr. King, and that is Shakira King, who is my friend and has become a mentor to me. She's done some amazing work as an activist in the city of Philadelphia. Um, I often think of her before I make a move sometimes because she can give you a look or give you some truth. In the tradition of my mother, in the tradition of my grandmother, in tradition of my business partner, I'll be very frank, as woke as I may think I am, I'm reminded that as a man, I have to unlearn things that have been put upon us um, through the patrial, colonialist system. So with all that being said, I'm just going to pass the mic for a hot 16 to somebody I love very dearly, and that is Shakira King.
Hello, everyone. Taib, thank you for all of those wonderful words. As Taib mentioned, my name is Shakira King. I am an activist and organizer here in the city of Philadelphia. I have been doing that now. I can officially say for the last 10 years here in the city of Philadelphia. Getting up there, geez. But Taib asked me to, just kind of preface this wonderful conversation with the ladies of Alpha Kappa Alpha, um, you know, on this Dr. King Day about, just our collective responsibility, right? Now more than ever, I feel like we have a collective responsibility to and for each other, right? To and for each other. Because what unfortunately this COVID situation has shown us is that if we do not care for each other, meaning Black and Brown communities and other communities of color, if we do not care for each other, no one else will. And in that spirit, I was able to create a mutual aid project that launched last June. It's named Join Aid, like Live Aid, but Join Aid. Very Philadelphia. And I wanted to make sure it had that very distinctive name because it is born of a person who is from the city of Philadelphia and loves the city with her entire heart, and is for people in the city of Philadelphia who need those resources. So I'm very proud to say from June until we did our last round in November of 2020, we were able to collect and distribute, 33,000 for people who needed things like their light bills paid and their internet bills paid so that their children could go to school, those that needed food, our trans siblings that needed, those things so that they are gender affirmed. All of those things we were able to help provide very material, our own very material stimulus package for people in that neighborhood. There are a number of women on this panel that I admire. I want to say thank you to Representative Shirelle Parker and Representative Gauthier. I respect these two women very much and appreciate the work that they have done and continue to do on behalf of Black Philadelphians, especially the most marginalized of us. So I won't take up any more space, and I cannot stay the entire time, but thank you for having me. Ladies, I'm looking forward to hearing this conversation, and thank you for being who you are.
Thank you, Shakira. And with that said, I would like to open up the discussion and introduce one of the freshman four, Jamie Gautier, council member Jamie Gautier, and then also Ms. Joanna McClinton, Representative Joanna McClinton. Um, and I don't want to mispronounce or misspeak. Can you explain what is unique about your new position that it's, to the best of my knowledge, is the first for a woman or a person of color, if I'm correct?
Thank you so much, Taib. Just the first woman, the first African American. We did have an African American man, but the first woman of color to be the floor leader for the House Democrats.
Thank you very much. And I would also like to introduce my friend, mentor, uh, Council Member Shirelle Parker. Welcome. So with that, what's been said here, we are in unprecedented times as people of color, as Black people within the history of white supremacy and colonialism. As our capital was just run up on, as I like to say. And not that far after the city of Philadelphia was mentioned as the most important city in the world by The Economist on the eve of the election, right? And then for those who have kind of gone back and forth, like I'm right, I'm left, I'm right, I'm left, I believe Black women in particular have carried the torch on the right side of history and never wavered, you know? And Shakira and I worked on a project where I learned this year that in our region, approximately 19% of African-American men were voting with the other side. I'm partisan. Some of y'all can't be. I'm very partisan. So with all that being said, representatives, can you tell us what's on your heart and mind before I just dig into questions? Any one of you are welcome to begin. Do I have to wait? Is that up to me? I think Elias to unmute. Can you unmute the representatives? I don't think I'm in charge.
I'm unmuted, so I'll get started.
Thank you.
Thank you, Taib, for having us this afternoon, and Megan, and of course, the Rho Theta Omega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha. It's an honor to be here with my councilwoman, where I live in Copps Creek, Jamie Gautier, and of course, the majority leader in council, Shirelle Parker, who I had a few months of a privilege to serve with in Harrisburg. But when I worked in the Senate, I used to just stop and stare the way people stare at Beyonce, because she is literally a goddess. But that being said, I'm sorry for the awkward stares. I was just a fan. I got that off my chest. Happy King Day. So there's so much on our minds right now. I'll be brief because I want to hear from everybody else. But of course, with the swearing in coming up of our new president and our first woman vice president, our first woman of color, our first Southeast Asian, our first Black woman, you fill in all the blanks. She checks every box. We are just excited because I'm sure that so many of us were concerned. I'll use Taib's words, when racist terrorists ran up on us. I was texting my congressman, all of us actually, Dwight, are you okay? Is everything all right? You need me to come down there? Like, I was very concerned about the safety, not just of the members of Congress and Senate, but their staff, their interns, the fellows, everybody that's in the building at a sensitive time. So I think that the work that we do, the work I do in Harrisburg, the work these women do in City Hall, it's timely, and the time to see how fragile our democracy is. It's time to address that. It's time to call lies out so that these things don't continue to be perpetuated and add fuel to the racist fire of white supremacy, and knock it down one by one. Just like Dr. King, it can't be knocked down like a wall, but pebble by pebble, or however it is, brick by brick. I look forward to dismantling these racist systems, and hopefully someone else is unmuted by now.
Hello, everybody. What's on my mind is that it's hope for the future because Black women have continually stepped up to be heroes in our country and be heroes in our communities time and time again. And Black women are largely responsible for many of, we've had a lot of bad happen over the past year or so, but Black women have been largely responsible for a lot of the good that has happened. And by that, I mean, with our election, Black women have been not only some of the most reliable voters for the Democratic Party, but they've been some of the most reliable organizers. We saw the importance of that in the primary with the wins we had in South Carolina and in other places where Black women really came through. We saw that in Georgia, I guess it was just last week. I don't know, everything feels like time feels different now. But I think it was last week when we saw what happened in Georgia, and not only with the voters, but with how Stacey Abrams really played a leadership role in making sure that we were able to gain a hold in the Senate. Black women have led the social movements that have really created change right now. So Black Lives Matter, for example, Black women created that movement. And we saw, all summer that movement really come to maturity and really become, I think, one of the most important social movements in the entire country, right? And that movement has brought our country to a new state of racial awakening. And even locally here, we see heroes like Dr. Ala Stanford, who has been championing equity in how our city deals with the coronavirus, with testing and with the vaccine. Throughout the pandemic, Black women in the neighborhoods that I represent have been the ones making sure that their neighbors are well taken care of and that our communities stay safe and supported. And so I feel hope for the future because of all the gains I've seen come from Black women, but I also feel like it's time for Black women to get their fair share too. And I'm in for that part of it as well.
Thank you. Just want to start by saying good evening to everyone. Special shout out to you. And she was so humble, Tayeeb, when you asked her to explain what it is that she did. I'm talking about Democratic leader McClinton. And I just have to state for the record, because history is important. For the record, the first Black Democratic leader, majority leader in the PA House of Representatives came from Pittsburgh. And she mentioned that, he was a gentleman. That was K. Leroy Irvis. When she, as a Black woman from the city of Philadelphia, gets her colleagues from across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to decide that she is the one who will stand up to be the face and the voice of the Democratic Party in Pennsylvania. I didn't say this. What's his name? He said it. Carville, James Carville. He said Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Alabama, in between. That's how conservative this state is. They chose her. Wasn't a mistake. They selected her. They chose her. Leader McClinton, thank you for being humble, but I'm always going to tell the truth. And council member Gaultier, Rockstar, a member to council, and to the ladies of Rho Theta, of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. They know that I knew that they were one of the sponsors here today, and they know that I'm proudly representing here today. But I also need to state for the record, and I want you all to know this, because this is going to be a part of a few things that I want to say. I would not have had the opportunity to get a scholarship to Lincoln University had it not been for the ladies of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, both the Rho Theta and the Omega chapter. So to my Penn Health sisters, I say thank you so very much. And I am proud that you are a part of my village. With that being said, what am I thinking about? I am thinking about my former president, may she rest in peace, the late Dr. Niera Sudarkism, who wrote a book called The Strength of Our Mothers. The strength of our mothers. And then I think about those shoulders. And then I think about, I was listening to good brother Jamal Bryant. It's been circulating, this piece that he did on January the 6th when this was all going down. I was listening to him talk about we Black people forgetting who brought life back to a campaign that was dead before Lazarus, a Black man by the name of Jim Clyburn in the U.S. House, said, "Wake up, campaign. I'm going to breathe some life back into you after you appeared to be dead from the caucuses when the other folks were there where my people weren't represented. And in order to do that, I'm going to go call the people who hold it together." And that was Black women. So as Brother Jamal said it, Pastor said he went and called Big Mama and them. And I wanted to be intentional with that, because when I think of all of this, I think about Big Mama and them. I think about Black women, AKA's co-sponsoring this. I'm a Delta, Jamie's West Philly, Shirelle's Uptown, Joanna's Southwest Philadelphia, Delaware County, and thinking about all the ways. Shakira, I don't see you. I will call you the millennial generation. Megan, I saw you on here. Megan, another woman of color, right? With Asian, Pacific Asian, Islander, from what I can see, right? And I've thought of every single way in this nation that folks have attempted to use race, sex, class, or gender, racism, sexism, classism, colorism, all of this. I mean, AKA's Deltas, we know it, right? Joanna, you and I chocolate. Jamie, you a little bit more caramel, as my grandmother would say. In all of these different ways. I'm a certified secondary English teacher, right? I'm a history person. I'm a communicator. Joanna's an attorney. Jamie's a formal urban city planner. And all of these different ways people have tried to use our greatest strengths as tools to keep us divided, because they know what happens when the power gets together. So for me, I am very much interested in doing what you all, and Taib, I know you remember her from North Philly. You can't know North Philly and not know her. Roxanne Jones. She said in our own time, in our own space, and with God's grace, we can make a difference. What's that Shirelle Parker saying? I don't function the way McClinton does. Jamie don't walk the way Shirelle Parker walks. We don't communicate the same way. I develop and move towards acquiring solutions to challenges in a manner that is different from the way McClinton and Gaultier work. But each of us in our own space, Shakira in her advocacy space, while we're inside in the building at the table, and Shakira's outside leading a protest that has to result into policy, as Brian said, because if it doesn't, it was just a parade. If you're in a protest that doesn't result into policy, and it doesn't result into policy, in the end, it was just a parade. Guess what? All of us are adding value. And for the first time, I think, and I'll be very honest, in my lifetime with Sister Kamala, all of us coming, together, the domestic worker like my grandmother, those who would be perceived as the talented Tiff, you sorority girls, those links, all that classism and ism and homophobia and xenophobia and all of those things that have been used as tools to separate us, we finally figured it out, that the plan was to keep us divided and less powerful. That was their effort to disenfranchise us. But now I think we get it. And I'm hoping that today's event is a step in the direction to say, we're going to use whatever our walk is, whatever Dr. King called it, the blueprint. Joanna's, yours ain't mine. Gaultier's, mine ain't yours. It's all different, but we all in our own way and in our own space have a responsibility to make a contribution to the struggle.
Thank you for those words of inspiration, Councilmember Parker. And I guess I'll direct the first question to all of you. If you could give me, your elevator of how you came to a life of service prior to politics. Well, this is MLK Day. We're speaking in regards to community, but I think oftentimes contemporary leaders think of, I'll be frank, a lot of male leaders think of leadership as a job, where some of my women mentors think of it as a life of service. So what was your first entry from an origin story of how you came to a life of service prior to politics. Anyone's welcome to jump in.
I'll start us off this round again. So I grew up in Jamie's district in Southwest Philly, and growing up in church, you usually learn as a young person how to serve. Whether or not you want to, you are drafted and recruited and trained, and everything that my mother did as a member of our church at 52nd and Parish, I had to do. So she joined the usher board, I had to join the usher board. She actually didn't sing on the choir, but I had to sing on every one of them. And she also ran our outreach program and still does. It's on Zoom now. But from a teenager, you know, I had to learn how to assist in Vacation Bible School, how to watch after little children, how to take care of them and serve them lunch and meals, and what was it like to take care of other people. And seeing that model as a child was something that I didn't know until now, like how deeply instilled it was in me. So as I grew up and went to school, you know, I studied political science, but not with the eye towards politics. I studied it because I was preparing for law school, and all my mentors in high school said, you need to study political science. And I did great internships, worked on a few campaigns, but I'll tell you, even with that, it was fun and exciting, but I never saw myself ever pursuing public office. Went to law school at Villanova, became a public defender in Philly, and I learned a new level of service because I had already learned, you know, the bare bones of looking out for other people, taking care of them, but representing people who are both poor and accused of serious crimes, young people, older people, wiser people, people of all age ranges who were literally with their lives on the line at times and not doing capital cases, doing regular serious felony trials. It was really intense. It was great work. I learned not just to serve, but how to really empathize with people who were in conditions that I had never been in before. So these are things that were instilled on me way before seeking public office. And after being at the public defender's office for almost 10 years, at the same time, I was a youth leader at my church as a younger adult, all through my 20s into my early 30s, took care of the teens and the adolescents, playing programs. I then went to work for my senator's office. And that was the first time as a postgraduate adult that I really was in the eye of politics, and worked for Senator Anthony Williams as his chief counsel.
I'll go
next.
I got my, I think I got my commitment to service and landed where I am now because of my parents. I was born in Southwest Philly as well, in Kingsessing. My mother immigrated over here from the Caribbean, and my father was born in Philadelphia. And I think, you know, I think I got my commitment to getting a good education from my mom, because that was important to my mom's family success and their ability to come over here and thrive. I think I got my commitment to community from my father. My father came from a very impoverished family in Philadelphia. You know, several of his family members died, and they died from different things: alcoholism, you know, inattention to mental health disorders. But I say they died from poverty. And my father was, he uses education as a way of bettering his situation. He always knew that he had to focus on his education. He went on to become a lawyer. But the thing I admire most about my father, Leon Williams, is that he didn't use his law degree as a means of just gaining more money, right? And putting more money into his own pocket. He really used his law degree to become an advocate for Black people in our city. He defended activists. He championed the importance of Black people in our city having access to equal education. He ran for district attorney in 97 and 01, and was really kind of pushing, you know, what was then a pretty radical idea of what a DA should be, right? That a DA should be in the community, that a DA should be helping people to stay out of jail, right? So this was about 20 years before Larry Krasner, and people weren't really ready for that from a Black man. But I watched my father, and that's how, and I molded myself after him. And so for me, that looked like becoming an urban planner and helping people in neighborhoods to amplify their voices and build the neighborhoods that they want to live in, and to build equitable neighborhoods. And so I winded up, I went to Penn for planning school. And after that, I worked for several years with a nonprofit called LISC, supporting the development of affordable housing across the city. I led a small business organization called the Sustainable Business Network. And right before council, I led the Fairmount Park Conservancy. So I feel like in some form or fashion, I've been helping Philadelphians to really build the communities that they want to live in, right? And to make sure that their voices can be heard in how their neighborhoods are developing. And I wanted to run for council. You know, I didn't have a political career. I had a nonprofit background, but I wanted to run for council because I feel like being a district council member is one of the most powerful opportunities in this city to really empower people to shape and have an imprint on their neighborhoods. And I think that's incredibly important at a time when Black people are getting displaced, you know, all over our city. And Black people are seeing their neighborhoods change in ways they don't feel like they have control over. And so that is why it was important to me to move from sort of being an urban planner to being a policymaker and a legislator, because I feel like I can have a powerful and positive impact in this space.
Thank you so much for that. And Shirelle.
So, you know, Philadelphia is a very incestuous city, and Philadelphia politics is very incestuous. And so my not being a Cosby kid, when I came up to age in the 1980s, was shocking to some folks. And I only thought about it, honestly, she's gonna kill me for putting on Broad Street. One of my mentors, one of the ladies who actually introduced me to Philadelphia is on Karen Warrington. When I was 17, I wrote a speech about my life at the urging of my white high school English teacher. And when I tell people that I am a product of the Philadelphia public school system, okay, here I get a little hoity. I just remind them I am a product of the Dr. Constance E. Clayton public school system in the city of Philadelphia. And so during that time, here is why Shirelle Parker could never be a racist, because my village was so diverse. Here it was a white English teacher who said to a Black girl whose mother was a single teenage mother, got pregnant 15, gave birth to her at 16. When I'm talking to non-white audiences, non-Black audiences, I remind them that I was born in 1972. It was not in vogue for Black women to have a child out of wedlock. You could easily be sent south, you know, your mother, and then maybe 2 years later, she could come back holding me, saying she was carrying a little niece or nephew in her hand. Grandmom and grandpop did not say do that, right? She's from Manning, South Carolina. Daddy's from Accomack County, Virginia. She's a domestic 8th grade education. Daddy's a physically disabled Navy veteran. They meet in North Philadelphia. When my mother got pregnant, so goes the story. Aunt Vi said, Dorothy, she needs a new environment. I don't know how they did it, but they may have hit the number, but they moved on uptown like the Jeffersons. I get on the 1900 block of Penfield Street, which is in Northwest Philadelphia, in a beautiful brick stone house with hardwood floors, beautiful architecture, tree-lined block. When it was just in the midst of white flight, it used to be all Italian and Irish and Jewish. The white flight came, and then it became a predominantly working class area where the pastor, the teacher, and Taib, you know, 19th and Cheltenham well, pastor, teacher, the domestic, the bud worker, everybody lived in the same community. 1980s came, and crack cocaine knocked my neighborhood upside down. I'm in the 11th grade. I lose my mother when I'm 11 years old. She was only 26. You know, father never present in my life. He's consumed, you know, in the world. Mommy and daddy take care of me. Mommy is gone at 16, and my life could have gone any way. Teachers, coaches, Karen Warringtons, E. Stephen Collins, Augusta Clark, Marion Tesco, the village, Black, you know, and white, you know, AKAs and Deltas, you know, women and men from all walks of life say, Black girl, you got a voice and a story. You're a community organizer in this neighborhood. And this was before people began to say, you know, suffering from addiction is a public health crisis. people in my neighborhood were crack addicts and they were criminals. You know, men who were going to work and had pensions and health care at Bud and didn't need any kind of assistance from government, who got caught up in this, or women who got caught up in this, they were considered misfits. And that's when I became a community organizer. Now, I got to steal this from Maria Sanchez. She said, Shirelle, when we became community organizers, that was before Barack Obama made it a popular thing to do. It's a popular thing to do now to talk about community organizing. But in 1989, when you started cleaning graffiti and having to get it off of, you know, post offices and off of buildings at Ogans Avenue, so that when I was going to cheerleading practice for the Oakland Youth Association to get the Simons Recreation Center, where men and women, Black men and women, held up our community through that Little League Association. You know, we took pride in our community. It wasn't about someone coming in to save us. And so, Taib, I always have to give that background about me, because sometimes when people hear your story about who you are, they think who you are is, Shirelle, you're the majority leader, you're the council person, you were the state rep for 10 years, you Eisenhower fellow, you a Delta, you are this, you are that. No, I am the hope and the dream of those who chose to survive. I'm here because the domestics in my family said, we're going to clean the floors in those houses, because we want you, if you decide to do it, it's because you choose to, but not because you have to. So at a very, very young age, I learned that, and listen, guys, sometimes people tell me I'm too passionate, but I want each and every one, even those of you on here who I don't know, who I've never seen before, don't you ever think that any amount of money, any amount of a title is ever going to make me change. Because the day you see me saying, hello, everyone, that ain't me. That ain't who Shirelle Parker is. I ain't never been that way. This is what I learned very early. I detested bullies. I hated people who used their education. I hated people who used their class or their race or their status to make themselves appear to be superior and or stronger than somebody else. And so in mommy and pushing me to move, she and Aunt Vi would say, if you do well, extremely well in school, you can come back and be whatever you want to be. But when you get it, don't you act like it's yours. When you get it, you better take it back to the community and you better use it for the people who are there. So when I go and I get access to my ability to travel, and Karen and the radio station introduces me to Philadelphia, and Gussie, Tass, and Dwight wrap me in their arms, I got to learn the process to be able to come home to deliver. So I don't get this simply because Shirelle Parker wants to be grand. I go because this is a vehicle. This is my tool to deliver. And listen to this, not because I think what's best for anybody else, not because I think what's best, but I don't need a white paper to teach me about poverty. I don't need a white paper to teach me about addiction. I know it because I walked it, right? And so it's some truth to that. So in authenticity. So I just need to say that. And I'm like the Aggies. I'm Philly born, Philly bred. I'll be in Philadelphia till I'm dead. Okay, pause for me. Pause for me. Pause for me right now.
I like that. You ended that with a bar. I'm Philly born. I'm Philly bred. I'll be Philly till I'm dead. I'm very good with linguistics, so I caught that last bar. And the one other thing you said that you don't like bullies, but I know you love me, and I'm a social justice bully. Right. And I didn't come up through no white papers. I came up through black papers like W. Du Bois and, Marian Anderson and Paul Robeson and, dare I say, Mumia Abdul-Jabbar. I mean, my Mumia, not the one who dunks. So what you also talked about the lived experience, right? And one of my favorite cousins, Michael Leatham, got shot 9 times in 2009 and 3 times in 2017, and we lost him, right? And I remember having conversations with him driving through the Badlands, and I would ask him, how could we change this? How could we improve this? And we drove for like 10 blocks until we cracked up and realized we were having a different conversation, because he only had an imagination for how could we get less people locked up, or how you could make more off a package. and I was talking about economic development, and we realized that we had a different vocabulary, and we must have giggled for like an hour after that. All right. So to my next question, according to the Kennedy administration's Brotherly Love study in 2019, gun violence in Philadelphia disproportionately affected Black men. Nearly 75% of all victims were perpetrators, were young men, or the homicides thereof caused deaths of people between 15 and 34. All right. In 2020, we faced nearly 500 gun fatalities, highest since 1993. And I also just want to say to that violence is an economic issue, is an opportunity issue, is an education issue. In the city of Philadelphia, only 30% of third graders read on grade level. And we know that all across the country, they build prisons off of the estimates of fourth grade reading levels, right? So with all that said, and this being a new era of power, where for the first time we have a predominantly Black and woman-led council, we have Black women in positions with a social intelligence and lived experience that has never been in those positions of power. Can you speak to us as a group about some solutions from a public policy perspective at the state and at the city level? And I'll just, my last point is, I know there are many challenges going back 15 years where council has actually passed bills in regards to guns, but because of the structure of our state laws, we're still held under the shackles of public policy in Harrisburg. So as leaders, can you speak to us in regards to some public policy that we should be supporting, and some thoughts about what we need to address and, you know, eradicate those numbers?
So thank you for that question, Taib. That's very serious times as it relates to the public safety or lack thereof in our city. We are seeing not just sons, but also many daughters, particularly in 2020, expecting mothers who were killed or shot, some of it not non-fatal. But regardless, you know, we all take it very seriously at the state level. Of course, we are literally in warfare with it relates to the gun laws because of the Republican supermajority. And for those who haven't been following, there are 90 House Democrats for this session to the 113 Republicans. And for us to pass any legislation, we need 102 votes. And you have to know that some of the Democrats from other parts of the state do not experience gun violence like we do in an everyday level. I mean, even in 2019, the numbers were high. No, they weren't 500, but they were still too high. To me, one is too many. Two are too many. So that being said, you know, we have a hard time getting gun laws changed and even allowing the city to make their own gun laws. There was a big lawsuit several years back where, you know, they passed a law. I know that our councilwoman didn't vote for it, but they gave anybody standing to file a lawsuit for gun laws anywhere in the Commonwealth. You didn't have to be a citizen. You didn't have to live in the city or the municipality. But the long story short, our Supreme Court overturned that. But that being said, there's a few things that I believe need to be the forefront of gun violence. The first thing is schools. There's like a disconnection where we think it's always adults having beefs. Always we think it's adults having beefs on Instagram or social media, but it's not. Many times it starts with children. So Harrisburg is responsible for funding the schools. So the first thing I think that needs to happen as a way to decrease and hopefully end gun violence is to fully and fairly fund our schools, so that I know our children are learning virtually and we don't know how long that will be, but it's important that a child is in an environment where they know they're significant because they can see the investments all around. When you go somewhere nice and you say, oh, this is beautiful, oh, this is good, and this is clean, and this is safe, and I can use the bathroom and don't have to worry about seeing rodents. Like, our kids should not have to deal with that as a reality. That should never be something they're encountering as children in their youth. They need to know from the beginning beginning, they are significant. They are a high priority on our societal list of who's important. So we need to fund the schools. Another thing that I'm taking it into the second term now, is really teaching conflict resolution as a part of core curriculum. I was never a school teacher. I've only been an attorney. And of course, I have another hat. I'm a minister in my church, but I'm not taught inside a school. But I know that one of the things that needs to be taught in this day and age, and especially because technology just takes so much of the attention of our children and has changed the way we communicate. It's changed the way we express ourselves. It's changed the way we've abbreviated things from what are you doing to WYD. So that being said, we have to get with these young people and teach them what it means to get into a disagreement, but to resolve it peacefully. Everything does not have to escalate 0 to 100. We saw teenagers being shot at and shooting other teenagers in 2020 and in 2019. And thank you for bringing in Yay Philly. They're in my district, or like right around, doing important intervention work. The other thing I would say is intervention. The state in 2019 sent $500,000 to the city, and it's just being spent now for the group violence intervention program. And Councilmember Gautier and I, Jamie, were on the calls once a month getting updates. And while they are working hard, it just quite frankly is not enough. More work has to be put in, and more people that our young folks can relate to need to be working there, not just people in uniform as police. It's a partnership to basically go into neighborhoods that are high in violence, like it is in West and Southwest Philly right now, and to try to connect people who are on a targeted list of likely to either shoot or to be shot at, and to try to connect them to resources. But what we're seeing is the young people are not connecting to those resources. They are not answering the doors. They're not engaging. And it must be because we don't have the right folks on the front line. So while the state is willing to work hard to get more funding for that, we also need to make sure that at the local level, we're doing enough so it's the right people in front of them. I know if I walk up to one of my neighbors on my block and say, hey, you're likely to be shot or to shoot, they're going to say, excuse me, Joanna, who are you talking to? What are you talking about? So I know I wouldn't be the credible messenger, but we need to get these credible messengers in front of our youth because it's serious. And we were at a rally on the steps of the Art Museum today, many leaders across the city, just telling everybody, and for those who are on social media, the folks from No Gun Zone and Brandon McFly, like, we are not going to go into this year and accept those numbers. We're not going to end 2021 and say, oh, it was 459. No, we are not going to do it. And we have some outside organizations that want to do canvases through the city, that want to intervene. We have a whole lot of issues, and so much of it relates to where I am right now. It looks like I'm on the floor, but I'm at home. So much starts at home and goes on and carries into the outside. And while we can't reconfigure people's home setup and home styles and things that they have or don't have at home, we can see what happens once they hit that door, from the schools to what they're learning in the classrooms to preventing it on a serious level, intervening as well.
Thank you for that. Jamie, do you want to jump in?
Sure. I wanted to first thank Leader McClinton for all of the fighting that she's doing in Harrisburg on the legislative side, and to make sure that we get funding here to the city to support gun violence prevention. Even with all of the struggles that we have on the state level because of the political makeup, I believe that our city has to have a more robust and urgent, all hands on deck local approach to gun violence. This is something that is impacting my district greatly. I've been to more gun violence rallies, vigils after people have shot and died, and to more emergency community meetings this year in my first year in council than I ever could have imagined, right? It seems like not a day goes by that there's not a shooting in West and Southwest Philadelphia. We had a mass shooting at a rec center where a pregnant woman was shot, and an elderly woman. We had a 7-year-old girl playing on her sidewalk get shot. Thank God she didn't die. We had people shot at Malcolm X Park. And, I go to a lot of the sites of these shootings, and I talk to people, and the feeling of hopelessness there is really distressing. I'll never forget, I had one woman in the community look at me and tell me that she felt like nothing was ever going to change in her neighborhood. And so you have people who are essentially in their communities, scared to go to and from work, scared to let their kids play outside. And I think that's wrong. And I also think that it needs to rise to the level of an emergency in our city. Anytime you've had, at this point, we had almost 500 people murdered through gun violence in 2020. We had over 2,200 shootings in 2020. We've had 17 homicides to date. That's an emergency. And I'll go so far as to say, if almost 500 white people in our city had been killed through gun violence, it would be an emergency. And so in September, I authored a resolution requesting that the mayor declare gun violence a citywide emergency in Philadelphia. I got the support of 14 of my fellow council members, including Leader Parker. Thank you. And the resolution outlined a number of actions that I think we would be taking as a city if we were approaching this as a crisis or an emergency. The first is information. And we see the mayor on the TV, as he should be, every day talking about how the city is addressing COVID. Why are we not doing that with gun violence? People in our communities deserve to know what's being done around gun violence and how it's working. With the level of gun violence that we have, we need to see our mayoral administration on the TV every day talking to us about what's being done. I think that we need to rally the troops. We need to put a call out to our business community to bring jobs to the table. We have world-class institutions here that can be helping us to address this issue. Additionally, gun violence should be a major issue for every city agency in the city of Philadelphia. That's the type of approach that we've taken to addressing COVID, and I think gun violence should be just as urgent. Also, there are a host of evidence-based programs around gun violence prevention and violence intervention that have worked in other places. Representative McClinton mentioned group violence intervention, which we're doing here, but we need to do more of it and to be measuring our progress and make sure that we're implementing it correctly. There are a host of other programs that focus on identifying youth who are participating in this activity and connecting them to opportunity and helping to put them on a different path. We need to bring those approaches here, and we need to do it now. And so I've been saying over the past several months that although I respect the valiant efforts that people here are taking with addressing gun violence, is not enough. We need to do more. We need to raise the level of priority, and we need to direct more resources towards it. And I think all of the Black people dying every day across this city deserve no less. So thank you for the question.
Thank you for those comments. And Shirelle, I know you're about to drop hot fire rocks.
No, I'm not. I'm only going to say, John, I'm going to ask John to do this for me. If John is on, John, can you please put the link for council's agenda on police reform? Councilwoman Gauthier, you remember the list that included all of the legislation that we worked on. We want to put that into the chat. And the only other thing I want to add is, is this. Access to economic opportunity and self-sufficiency is the key to me for everything. Somebody said it, and I can't remember like putting my hand on it. I don't know if it was Leader McClinton or Member Gauthier, but you talked about what people see. I don't have a job where I can make a living wage, $15 an hour, get some health care, possibly a tad bit of retirement security, make a wage to be able to pay my mortgage. Notice that I didn't say rent, because with all due respect, all this work that we've been doing, and Councilmember Gauthier has been doing a yeoman's job, Leader McClinton, all of our legislatures, we've definitely been fighting for rental assistance. But let me say this to you. Being renters is not what gave us self-sufficiency here in the city of Philadelphia. No matter how much poverty we always have had one of the largest rates of home ownership than any other big city in the nation. So every time somebody talks to me about the rising rate of gun violence and or homicides, I say, I want to talk about access to economic opportunity, self-sufficiency, and not just the $15 jobs, but funding for startups, funding for neighborhood, based businesses, and then who's benefiting from doing business with the city. Philadelphia has very limited revenue generating capacity. So when we have to make difficult decisions like the one we just made, so we can generate $400 million to make an investment into closing costs and down payment assistance, housing preservation, all of the programs that we talked about that we need, we have to make those very, tough decisions. But I also want to say this: please don't allow anybody to try to tell you that they have the silver bullet. What was it when President JFK died? I think they called it the single bullet theory. It is so frustrating to hear folks act as if there is one thing. There is no one thing. It's not. What Leatham McClinton and what Member Gautier talked about with prevention and priority and information and all of the organizations that are moving. Leatham McClinton talked about, what did you call them, Leatham McClinton? I'm learning it. Are they called influencers? Social media influencers. Like, how are we making sure that those people get in the front of the advocacy, who are closer to the generations who are engaged? And so credible messengers. Yes, I mean, that part becomes extremely important to me. So economic opportunity, education is important, houses, but that hopelessness. Let me give you a quick one. 52nd Street, 69th Street, Vernon Road, Knowley, Broad, and Erie, Chestnut Hill. How many of you drove up Germantown Avenue from Germantown and Gresham Valley on up? And then how many of you drove down Wadsworth Avenue to get across the street to Montgomery County crossing so you can get over to 309? You had to say to yourself, why does this beautiful, aesthetically appealing green, the highly decorated, why does this neighborhood look like this? And Leatham McClinton, what did you say? Going into buildings where you got to hope you don't run into rodents, there's trash everywhere, nobody's responsible for cleaning it up. I will argue that it's a nucleus of all of these things. When you look at it all at one time, it gets so frustrating because you think you'll never be able to chop it down. But I will argue McClinton and her team and all of our leaders there moving forward, Gautier and Catherine Gilmore Richardson and all the new people who are bringing fire into council, and then those of us who have been around, everybody is doing some work. But Taib, if I had a job and I'm making my own money, I'm not trying to get your money. I ain't trying to go in your house because I got to go to sleep so I can get up and go to work the next day to go earn on my own and take care of my own. And then if I do that, I'm not working 2 and 3 jobs, so I don't have to miss the parent teachers meeting at the school. And then you wonder why I don't know what's going on with my kids.
So to go off script for a second, but all of you inspired some thoughts because you talked about economics and business, right? And that as a business owner, Megan and I have had, dare I say, a tremendous amount of success leading with purpose, right? And when we develop projects like the Institute of Hip Hop Entrepreneurship, which was the only incubator I know of that was all Black in the city of Philadelphia, over 9 months, and then awarded $30,000 for people to create businesses. I'm not going to call out any names, but there are people in departments and organizations that are in charge of servicing the Black community who shrugged at us, right? And then we won another National Challenge Award from the Knight Foundation. 4,500 applicants from 26 cities made the finals of 150 people. Got awarded $300,000 to create a 3-month exhibit around the history of redlining to show people, we know what redlining is, but to show policymakers, architects, real estate developers, people who work in the Commerce Department, the history of what happened to our people, and people still shrugged at us, right? So when we talk about economic development, from a Black lens, something has happened to Dr. King's legacy, to Malik El-Shabazz, Malcolm X's legacy, where they have been rebranded because we only talk about 2 or 3 speeches. For Malcolm, it's the Ballad of the Bullet, and we frame him through a lens of being more associated with Elijah Muhammad than his evolution after he traveled the world and went to Ghana and went to Mecca and met with world leaders and had a different vision. Right. And then when we talk about MLK, we don't talk about him going to the United Nations to talk about economic development and what's happened to Black people in particular, all right? And then historically, I'm gonna go off script here, the Community Development Corporation came from a speech in 1968 from Robert Kennedy, all right? And at that time, Nixon was advised to change Black power into Black capitalism. And it was a rebranding. And historically, Black business people, the first Black business people to be lynched in the Red Summer of 1919 were Black business owners, were Black people who owned newspapers, were Black people who spoke up. And Ida B. Wells wrote about that so well, she had to escape Memphis for telling the truth. So there is an era of Black business people and bureaucrats who have an idea of Black capitalism that is removed from Black liberation. And in the city of Philadelphia, we have to get back on message, because that is what brought W.E.B. Du Bois to Philly. That is what made John Coltrane come to Philly. That is what made Sun Ra come to Philly. So to get back on message, I'm gonna ask Shirelle Parker, what inspired you to create the Walter P. Lomax legislation? And can you talk to us a little bit about what that is?
So Tayyip, I got really very, very frustrated during the midst of the movement this summer when I heard all of these firms publicly stating that, oh, you know, we believe that Black Lives Matter, and putting these grand statements on their websites. And we had no way to measure what their firms on the inside looked like. I also thought about the number of firms that have literally built wealth, generational wealth in their own families by simply getting the contract with the city of Philadelphia, one that they may have held for 10, 15, and or 20 years. So then I thought about Reverend Al Sharpton at Bright Hope Baptist Church. And he was like, one of the things Philadelphia you all need to do is turn on the lights. And, you know, if you Black people in poverty, y'all know what they say happens when you turn on the lights in kitchens. So he says, turn on the lights. And so we thought about Dr. Walter P. Lomax, who was unapologetic about acknowledging that it was because he got an opportunity to do business with the Pennsylvania state under the leadership of then Governor Casey and the late Secretary of Public Welfare, John White Jr., that he had the ability to grow out his health firm. And I said, what if these people no longer could just tell us that they believed in Black Lives Matter, but we got a chance to see who their firms were, and we put that information in a public space, and then the public had a chance to measure for themselves, right? And then whatever happens, my job is just to try to find the way to get it into a public space, because guess what? You can't measure what you don't count. And I'm just not just talking about an EOP for a big construction. I'm talking about every contract moving through, you know, the city of Philadelphia. And so we put it there. Next thing, I want to go back to Tayyip when you talked about this economic development, because now, you know, this is my baby in my heart. One thing I would argue that we haven't done well, but we're getting better at, and Leatham McClinton, I want to credit you and Appropriations Chair Hughes and all of our state legislators for this. The dollars that they just delivered home, over $225 million specifically earmarked for disadvantaged businesses. You know, you got to find a way to, you got to get it done however you got to get it done, right, Leader McClinton? Like sometimes you can't say what you really want to say, but you got to just find a way to get it done. But to deliver those kind, and people don't understand that, right? But to deliver those kind of resources to Philadelphia, that was incredible. The work that we did in Philadelphia, I saw Sylvie is on, our former commerce director, Councilwoman Gaultier, acknowledged her work. I mean, the program we stood up, that was amazing. But Tayyip, this is a space where I would argue Philadelphia hasn't reached its potential. And I'm going to tell you what we haven't done. We haven't fully leveraged our intergovernmental cooperative planning. I would argue that they are regional organizations that impact New Jersey, Delaware, and Pennsylvania. that specifically impact our local and regional economies. That if you couple that with the advocacy of the private sector, funding from local, state, and federal government, we could be doing much, much more and being unapologetic about it. And I will argue that leadership is needed, in this space, and folks who are willing to stand up about it. Now, I can't go into it, but I will argue with you that I think there's going to be an opportunity very, very soon to do some very significant work in the area of economic development and the disparities in the community development corporation arena. Because I want you all to get this too. The reason why some of their commercial quarters look better than others, Taib, let's just talk about it. Some of them have got a board of directors that has money, where they can contribute to the organization and go write the grant. They have the technical skill set, background skill set where they can get the money. Then you got the neighborhood CDC, some loyal people, committed people in the neighborhood, but the technical skill set, Taib, to do the work like that you all are doing with Little Giant, they don't have that. So they don't seem to be securing and or leveraging many of the resources that, once again, the disparity in terms of equity, the haves and the have-nots. You have, because you have the lawyer, you have the accountant, you have the grant writer, you have all of that in your background on your team. And little old me, I'm just trying to find somebody to help. So we haven't leveraged our resources. So for Leader McClinton, Councilwoman Gautier, we've got, Evans and Boyle and Scanlon. And I would argue that I think you're going to see some stuff coming for Philadelphia in soon. I think you'll see some things coming and you'll be really pleased about it. And I'm being disciplined. Sylvie's probably saying, button it up, Councilwoman, but I'm trying.
I appreciate that. That's almost like the leak before the mixtape, before the tour, before we get to merch. So if you need any help with the branding on this new initiative to make Philadelphia, me and Sylvester Mobley from Coded by Kids used to meet like 2 or 3 times a month years ago when we were trying to work with Technically Philly and Philly Tech Week and the mayor. I'll go on record. You could tell him, Adam, I'll call it. He had a Jive Turkey program called North Star. And it was all about Black technology, right? We used to meet and we used to talk about, in the lack thereof, of Black Silicon Valley, where else was a better place to do it than Philadelphia? We got life science. We got more anchor institutions. We got the University of Pennsylvania with a $14 billion endowment. Within 100 miles of Philadelphia, you have politics and more wealth than any other place, dare I say, in the Western Hemisphere. And there are more Black people who can drive to Philadelphia in 3 to 5 hours than any other place in the Western Hemisphere, right? So if you're gonna build a Black Silicon Valley, Philadelphia is the place to do it. And when you lock down Harrisburg, and Jamie and Shirelle, when you put the headlock on council, hit Megan up, and we will renegotiate a branding for the new normal. So with all that said, we have talked a lot, and we don't have that much time. We have a lot of really smart people here. If anyone would like to add any questions for our illustrious panel, please drop them in the chat and I will try to manage. And then, I have some friends and colleagues on here. I see Holly Mack Ward, who I've known longer than I know I like to care to admit. I see Charles Hopkins, a young man who works in finance, who's a West Philadelphian. I see Andrew Goodman. I see somebody from Shift Capital. We always have my light-skinned twin, Richard Binswinger, in the chat. I see Mikhail Solomon. I'm on her board for Prism Art Fair. For those of you who don't know, it's the largest African, Caribbean, and African-American art fair that happens during Miami Art Week. Most people know that as Art Basel. Most of the people you see come across your timelines that are herald artists today, they were probably at prison 3 to 5 years ago, and you could have afforded them at a better price. So with all that said, does anyone have any questions that you would like to present to the panel? Oh, and Karen Warrington, you know, like that's my heart right there. So, Richard Binswinger, I'll call on you because you're the minority in the congregation. I wanted to know the panelists could bring a broader community, people from the burbs and people with wealth to share. Whew. Richard, you just gonna jump into the fire like that? Can you unmute yourself and ask?
Yeah, sure, sorry. The question really is, councilwomen, and minority leader, you know, you're going to need to bring in people from other places. So you were talking about Taib having his abilities and people in not being able to do that. I want to know how you're thinking about broadening out the congregation. How do we bring in the people who aren't going to be on this this session? Excuse the dog.
Thank you, Richard. Panel, anyone like to address that?
I think Donald Trump. I think Donald Trump and what we just saw happen in our nation's capital and the response that the private sector has given in hitting that pocketbook. I thought to myself, I said, wow, you know, I don't know, you know, but for a long time, people have been saying, do we imagine what would happen if the private sector comes along and says to elected officials, now let me tell you this, Harrisburg, I know this is a tough issue, but we want $15. And guess what? $15, because we don't have it, that's part of the reason why we have all of this violence going on. So until you guys find a way to make this $15 law, check this out. We're cutting everybody off. Listen, elected officials need didn't you all see them do it with the R's who they thought who were involved with the insurrection and the mobs and the riots and the anarchy? Like they said, look, we're gonna cut them off. And I said to myself, Ben Swinger, I said to myself, are they really serious? I can't believe these people are saying this in public. Like, is it real? But then more and more corporations started getting on saying that's right. You were involved, or, you tried to, encourage people to not believe or support the results of the election, you will not be able to get a financial contribution from us. So using the bully pulpit, because I would argue, with all due respect, and Leatham McClinton, I would love to hear from you on this. Remember, I was only there for 10 years, long enough to find my way to the bathroom. But I would argue there were some people who wouldn't pick up the telephone if I called. I couldn't get the same attention that it was when the leaders in the corporate community picked up the phone and called and said, hey, now, we need that cigarette tax. Dr. Hyder said the schools are not going to open if you don't give that tax. And Philadelphia needs those votes. Now, what are you going to do? Leatham McClinton, I don't know. Maybe it's better now.
I can't say that it's better, but I do thank Richard for that question, because it is key. It is key that it's not just the same stakeholders demanding the same outcomes. We need to make it as a way that everybody sees what benefits them ultimately. And I know as we looked at gun violence, we tried to make some efforts bringing in some partners from the chamber so that they could see less violence in Philadelphia, obviously being a benefit for their bottom line, for their clients, for their employees, for their headquarters. If you don't have to look over your shoulder and think, oh, somebody's coming to get me as I walk down wherever I am, whether I'm on Ogons or Broad, wherever I am, it's better for everybody. So I think that we do need to broaden the table. And as we saw, like some of the largest corporations in America that give to federal members of Congress, particularly conservative ones, seeing them walk away from the table, that means something. That's like taking somebody's plate while they're still ready to eat. And we have to have those types of hard line, drawing it in the sand, saying this is where we are, and clearly you put yourself over there. And there hasn't been enough of that. If there was more of that since November the 6th, then we would not have seen what we saw on January the 6th. I mean, my colleagues don't want to admit it, but I had a press conference on Wednesday last week. They are complicit. They filed lawsuits. They wrote letters with their signatures on it to the federal delegation saying, hey, don't count these electoral votes. Y'all know that's wrong. Like, everybody knows that's wrong. Even if your constituents are coming to your doorway saying, hey, we don't like the outcome and we're protesting, you have to be honest and tell them. So Richard, I look forward to talking offline. And Monique Mims, who was in the chat, you know, we have to really get around businesses being able to be partners in the advocacy for the public policy that'll make everything better, whether we're talking about inner city living or whether we're talking about doing business in the city, driving to the suburbs, having roads that are paved and not having a big pothole on 76, whatever it is. It literally is connected, but we don't always hear, particularly since we're all three of us Democrats, we don't always hear us talking about it in that language.
I think that it's important to have those partnerships that Richard talked about, and to have, you know, a broad amount of stakeholders who are all kind of rowing in the same direction. For my part, I spend most of my time trying to reflect the voices of people who I think are most vulnerable in this conversation. That's what I think my focus is. I spend a lot of my time, for example, making sure that residents in my neighborhoods can organize and effectively work together to combat gentrification. I help them to develop community benefits agreements with developers, for example, that truly offer benefit to community. I, you know, worked this election cycle on a get out the vote effort to empower people in my district to vote. I worked on a lot of housing legislation to protect and support renters through the COVID pandemic, because I think they're the most vulnerable people. To the extent that there are investors that believe in hearing from the community and they want to invest in the community's vision, I'm incredibly open to that, right? That's what we want. But I do have to admit that first and foremost, the vision of my community, it has to lead. And to the investors can come and they can partake in that vision. I welcome that. And, you know, I don't come from the same circle that you come from, Richard, but that's why I like knowing people like you, right? To the extent that I know people who are good-hearted people, good-minded people, and who are from those circles and can facilitate those conversations, I think that's valuable. And I look forward to continuing to work with you in that way.
Thank you so much for that. So we don't have that much more time, and I want to ask one more question and maybe open it up to one other person. And then I'm going to defer to Tracy and the AKAs to close us out. Something that has been heavy on my heart for some time, and my therapy has been my work, and in the sense that I lost my mother 10 years ago. And it took me years to articulate that I lost her to environmental and structural racism. And when you gain an understanding of our history and the public policy that creates disparities and the depravity that many of us live in, when I think about Philadelphia, I'm not a mathematician, but if I were to break down the demography, the average Philadelphian is probably a 35-year-old woman of color, you know, most likely Black, but let's just say a woman of color. And if I think about 35-year-old women of color, you know, I hear things like 65 cents on the dollar. I see nationally all kinds of examples that I will call the outlaw paradigm, when you have a Black woman who's put in charge of something that has decades of structural racism, right? And then I saw that after the Capitol just went through an insurrection, where you can see video of police being culpable and complicit. What did they do? They hired a Black woman, all right, to clean up all that mess. So, like, you know, and there's different examples of this. You know, my favorite person to bully is y'all's friend from 2th Street, a former mummer who is the top executive in the city. right? He is the best at putting Black women, white women, women of color in charge of something, and then not admitting that it doesn't have a budget to support it. So with all that said, can you speak to how we can make Black maternal health, Black life expectancy a priority within the policies that we're driving forward from this day on? Anybody?
Well, I'll go. I think it's about making sure that we as Black women are holding our representatives accountable, right? And making sure that we see our voices and our needs reflected in what's being churned out in terms of policy. I want to go. I want to liken your question to what we've seen around COVID. It was pretty amazing to me that from the earliest days of the pandemic, Dr. Stanford was getting up and saying, we're doing this incorrectly. We're not doing this in a way that's benefiting Black people. And she kind of stood on a bully pulpit and called out all of the major healthcare players and said, you need to do better. And they came to the table and they listened. And we're still not there yet. We're not there yet. We have a far way to go. And people like, Leader Parker and Councilmember Gilmore Richardson and other members of council fought for them to get, a table and fought for them to be listened to at the city. But I think we have to do that with maternal health as well, right? We have to make sure that what's happening in our city, what's happening at our healthcare institutions is equitable. And I think as in the same way that we vote and we come out to vote reliably as Black women, we also have to hold our representatives accountable for the policy that they're churning out. And we shouldn't stop doing that until we see, what we need to see.
Agreed. And I was going to just go straight to COVID as an example. As difficult as it was for us to just get access to testing in our communities where we live, not having to travel and get on several buses or spend a lot of money on a ride share or try to get a ride to get a test. I mean, that is the main example. As the saying has been going around, when white people get sick with a cold, Black people catch, pneumonia. And for Black women, because we bear so many responsibilities, whether you're talking about in the neighborhood, in the home, in the public policy office, official capacity, we have all of these responsibilities. So of course, as it comes to taking care of ourselves, that can never be number one, because we've got to do all these other things for this one, for that one, for kids, for grandmom, for mom, for dad, for this one, for the other, for the neighbor next door who needs help. So we often are, unfortunately, neglecting our own care and not taking care of ourselves and focused on our well-being, our fitness. And when we go to the doctor, you're waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. And then for, however many minutes it is, they sit there, rapid fire questions. And if you don't have a list ahead of time, and I do this with my seniors, because it's not just 35-year-olds, it's 55 and 75 and 85-year-olds. If you're not prepared with what you want to discuss at that visit, you'll just continue to be overlooked. So as it relates to us creating policy, the benefit just expressed in this panel is where we are and the roles that we're in, thanks to our neighbors who've elected us and given us these great responsibilities. We are unashamed with our Blackness and our womanhood. So we're speaking up and speaking out, whether we're talking about period poverty or maternal mortality or getting COVID vaccines. Like, we are making sure people are equipped with information. And when it's not fair and it's not equitable, we're calling it out and saying there has to be change. There should never be a young Black woman dying while giving birth. And that has happened in this city too many times at world-class health institutions. So what needs to change internally with their policies and their trainings and their sensitivities to our cries for help and for pain? What needs to change, whether we're talking about driving down the street, not knowing there was a protest and a Black woman and her children being pulled out of the car and beaten by police. I mean, all of these things are talking about our health and our ability to live. That woman could have died that night. Her children and her baby is probably still haunted. So we are working on policies to change these practices, because they're in institutions, they're in the police department, they're in the healthcare system, because if that doesn't change, we'll continue to be at risk, because of course we're taking care of everybody else.
Thank you so much for that. Um, so I think Megan's about to cut me off, and that means that I'm supposed to turn it over. My last remark for the day will be, I'm a proud member of the Black Star Film Festival Board. This year will be our 10th anniversary. It's a woman-led organization by my friend and colleague, Mary Holmes. We have a print sale this week. There's a link in the chat. If you can purchase a print, please do. If you cannot, please donate. And if you go to the gift shop, there's some other things there. There are many projects that in Philadelphia that support not just Black people, but the Black community. And what's good for the Black community is good for America. So I will leave it at that, and I will turn it over to who's ever up next. Peace, positivity.
Yeah, so I of course have to be the heavy. Just want to thank you all for joining. I want to say to the honorable speakers that I feel much better knowing that you're leading the city and the state. Taib, you make me proud that you're my partner. So it was a amazing conversation, and the last few minutes of the conversation, I think we could have gone on for days, and I really would like to continue that conversation and at another time in another forum, because truly, I think that touches all of us, and I think we really need to start talking about it a lot more. This recording is going to be available on our website. I think it's an important conversation to have a wider radiance. So please feel free to come to our website, review it or send it forward to other people. And as I said, this is going to be the first of a few conversations around these important topics. In deference to everyone's time, I'm going to hand this over. So Tracy, I know you weren't expecting to speak, but you can do the honors of introducing Dr. Celeste Merriweather. And again, just thank you to the amazing, amazing women on this conversation. Thanks. And thank you for everyone for joining. You've all been amazing too.
Yes, thank you everyone for joining this evening. This has been an awesome event. Thank you for all the chats and the robust conversations. To our political leaders, our fearless leaders, thank you. Keep fighting on the front lines. We're supporting you. We have your back. We're marching with you. Whatever you need, we're here to help and work to improve the betterment of everyone, just to make this world a better place for everyone, because that's what we want to do. And without further ado, I have the pleasure of introducing the president of my chapter, Dr. Celeste Merriweather.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. I'm a little bit like Shirelle. I try to have my little points, but I have to go off script. That was an amazing panel. I just couldn't help myself. We have been able to partner with Councilwoman Parker on many things in our chapter, but I am a new fan of Representative Leader McClinton, a new fan of Councilmember Gauthier. So I thank you so much, ladies, for being a part of our panel today. I have the honor of serving as the president of Rho Theta Omega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. And on behalf of our chapter, I want to thank all of you for participating in our Martin Luther King Jr. International Day of Service program, 08 Hours of Service, Strive Toward Freedom. Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority is an international service organization that was founded on the campus of Howard University on January 15th, 1908, and we just celebrated 113 years of service. We are the oldest, Matt, I had to do it, Shirelle. We are the oldest Greek letter organization established by African-American college educated women. And we have instituted groundbreaking social action initiatives and social service programs that have transformed communities for the better. Our programs continue to be steeped in the sorority tradition and embodied in the credo to be of supreme in service to all mankind. Under the leadership of International President Dr. Glenda Glover, our current international program theme is exemplifying excellence through sustainable service.
The Rho Theta Omega chapter was chartered in Philadelphia on May 22nd, 1988. And we currently have over 300 members who serve with a smile the greater Philadelphia community. Our annual celebration honoring Dr. King's legacy began this morning at 7 a.m. with the Mlk Walk Challenge, which will conclude at 11:59 today. The goal levels of the challenge commemorates a different march in the civil rights movement. That activity was followed by a low-impact workout at 9 a.m., a family story hour at 10 a.m., which can still be streamed on YouTube and Facebook Live. And please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Workshops on healthy eating during the pandemic at 11 a.m. featuring the author of The Princess of Picky Eating, Tries New Things, Stacey Woodson. Getting financially organized at 12 noon with Equitable, and thriving as a caregiver during COVID-19 at 1 with the author of The Color of Care by Kaya Jackson. Following those workshops, there was a riveting intergenerational discussion 50 years after King on Dr. King's approach to social justice. And of course, this phenomenal panel, we could not have asked for anything more to conclude our 08 hours of service. We have also been deeply honored to have been selected to be a part of the Presidential Inaugural Committee's National Day of Service. I would like to take this time to thank the MLK Day of Service Planning Committee for putting on such an amazing event today. Our project lead, Karima Buchnafa, and committee members, Shannon Camps, Stephanie Childs, Leslie O'Rourke, Rose Richardson, Gail McFadden Roberts, Lindsay Roberts, Wanda Roberts, Malika Williams, and our very own Tracy Williams. Special thanks to our chapter and sorority members who presented workshops today, Lisa Cooper, Kaya Jackson, Dr. Doreen Laurie, and Stacey Woodson. We are also extremely grateful for our partners for today's events, the IF Lab Little Giant Creative and the National Council of Negro Women Delaware Valley Section. Again, on behalf of Rho Theta Omega chapter, I thank you for attending this and some of our other events for the day. Your participation and your engagement ensured that our events were a success. We sincerely hope that we were able to be of service to you today and that you learned something or some things that will improve your life and our community. Please be sure to fill out an evaluation, which will be emailed to you, and visit our website at rhothetaomega.com for future events. Well, be safe, wear your mask, it's a serious matter.